All right, it's 7 o'clock. A joint meeting of Planning and Economic Development and Human Affairs Committee was held today, October 17th at 7 p.m. in the Aldermanic Chamber. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Alderman at Large Melbourne Moran Jr.
Present.
Alderman at Large Michael B. O'Brien Sr. Vice Chair.
Present.
Alderman June M. Karen.
Here.
Alderman at Large Ben Clemens. Alderman Derek Tebow is here. Alderman Thomas Lopez.
Here.
Alderwoman at Large Shoshana Kelly.
I'm here.
Alderman at Large Gloria Timmons. And Alderman Patricia Klee.
Here.
You have 7 here, 2 not here.
Also in attendance is President Wilshire, Alderman at Large, Sam Durfee, Planning Manager, Fire Marshal. Help me out, Mike.
I gotta make a list ahead.
Adam Pouliot.
By the way, Sam's not an Alderman.
Adam
at Large.
Pouliot.
Adam Pulio.
Sam's not an Alderman at Large.
Oh, no, Laurie Wilshire is Alderman at Large.
Sam is not.
But I said it after.
Because Sam looked confused.
Bob Mack, Director and Chief Public Health Officer, Bobby Bagley.
Welfare, yeah.
Bob Mack is from City Welfare, yes. Yeah. Sorry, there's more people than we're used to. And, of course, Director Sullivan, and how can I forget my esteemed colleague from Ward 5, Ernie Jetting.
Did you remember Alderman Karen?
I'm on the committee.
She's on the committee. All right, first, before we get into the joint meeting, we have to do the public hearing on amending the land use code notice provisions table in the Historic District Commission review procedure, O23-059. Is there anyone here to testify in favor? In opposition?
Did you want to testify in favor?
No, do you want to give the overview first?
Oh, the overview? Oh, Sam, yes, sorry.
He raised his hand. Okay.
Good evening. My name is Sam Durfee. I am the planning manager for the city. So this is a proposal to basically update our notice requirements that are in the ordinance. So this is for all land use boards, mostly planning board, zoning board. The reason for this, we were doing a review and we found that there were a number of references, statutes that were inaccurate, some things that were not consistent with state statute. In general, we've been going above and beyond statute and we're continuing to do that, but we're also finding that we were running into issues where the timing of our notice requirements for our land use boards, and very specifically getting publications out in newspapers was very challenging based on when the notice was required, when we were receiving applications. It was very difficult to do. And also the cost associated with publishing in the newspaper is quite high, to the tune of about $500 to $600 per agenda. So you have 2 planning board and zoning board meetings a month. You're up to about 20 meetings a year times $500 per meeting. So it's a significant cost. And so we were just trying to bring things into compliance with state statute, as well as kind of streamline our process while still meeting and going beyond the notice required by statute.
Great, thank you. Any questions? Yes, Alderman
I
O'Brien.
do have one question. On the newspaper and everything, I'm totally sympathetic. I mean, one of my favorite things was pick up the Telegraph and read it. I remember when it was an afternoon paper and not so much the daily. But unfortunately now, a lot of people don't subscribe to it. It's hard to get it in print. And there's online access, but a lot of people may choose not to really get that. So are you still requiring paper notification, seeing the next periodical would be the Union Leader? And I don't know if that is germane to Nashua, you know?
Sure. So the Union Leader is actually more expensive than the Telegraph. And the state statute was amended a couple of years ago to permit the posting of planning board agendas online, hosted on the city's webpage. That amendment did not include the zoning board. So we would still be doing newspaper notification for the zoning board. So there will still be that element, but we would be saving that expense on the planning board agendas.
Follow up, if I may. Well, keeping up with the times, would it be better to follow our guidelines of how we post a meeting and post it online, the city's website and stuff like that? And maybe gear in the future to eliminating the newspaper? I mean, like I say, trying to think of the taxpayers, just save a few dollars, it doesn't sound like anything that's gonna break the bank, but it doesn't, I really don't know. It's a complex issue. It's not like it's a regular periodical daily anymore.
Yeah, and I think what we're doing, we post signs on the properties for which applications have been received.
Correct,
And I
yeah.
think that's highly effective because while, like you say, not everyone reads the paper. If you are walking by a site and you see the sign, they're very noticeable, they're fairly large and they stick out. That's actually, I think, a very effective way to provide notification to those directly in the neighborhood that would be most affected by whatever is being proposed.
Correct.
Someone reads it in the newspaper, they could live in the southwest quadrant and this could be up on Canal Street and just, that's not the target audience for the notification, I guess you could say. So I think the signs do a very good job of noticing the neighborhood in which an application is proposed.
So just my last one, Mr. Chair. So we're still doing the newspaper, but we could look in the future of maybe eliminating it possibly?
So with this ordinance amendment, we're actually proposing to do away with planning board agenda notification in the newspaper. That's one of the changes.
Okay, then I would be more than satisfied. Thank you.
Alderman Cleve?
Thank you. So you're going to continue with the zoning board
Correct.
in the newspaper?
Yep.
The question I have here is, I see that you've struck the language about the newspaper, but then it says the abutter application fee shall be any necessary postal fees plus $3 per abutter. So is the $3 per abutter just kind of like an administrative fee for us to get the notice and
Yeah.
have to do up the mail and so on? So they're paying that plus the $3 administrative fee?
Yep, and that's not changing. That's
Okay.
been in that section of code.
Right.
Forever,
Right.
how long, yeah, we're not touching that.
So, may I
Follow
follow
up?
up? The other reason I asked is that you're right, we're not touching it, and I just recently came from, for lack of a better term, I'll use that as a user fee. I just came from a meeting where they talked about that we have to continue to bring our user fees and our costs up because fees like this are supposed to be specific as to what it's actually costing us to do something. So I didn't know if you had wanted to, not now, but in the future, consider some of these fees going up a little bit, whether it be by a couple dollars or so. Every penny counts. And if we try to, I assume the $3 is to cover the expense of the act of doing all of this and so on. Just keeping that in mind, I think it's something that we need to start looking at all departments.
And
But-
just to speak to that a little bit, the language in here does allow for necessary postal fee, and that has been increasing. We're actually up to almost $8 per certified mailing, which if you're noticing 100 abutters, that's a significant application cost. $800 plus, depending on the application, the $3 would apply as well. So that's notification by mailer is no small expense depending on the project.
Just quick.
Follow up?
So just to clarify, the person who's put the application in is paying for that fee and not the city?
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted that to be very, very clear. Thank you.
Alderman Lopez, and then Alderman Jettie.
Do you utilize the public television, the community television that we have, also to put notices out?
Not for notification of meetings, though all of our meetings are televised via that service.
Okay, is it something you'd consider?
Certainly, yeah, I think
Putting
we
little
would consider
flyers
that.
up when there's downtime?
Sure.
Alderman Jettie?
Thank you. I assume there's no one from the public. I don't want to take up the
No, I think
public's
we're good, Alderman Jettie.
time, so when I looked at this, I was concerned because I don't know about the other aldermen, but I've received complaints from people in neighborhoods who, for example, the definition of a butter is pretty limited. And so you have, some people who aren't a direct abutter, but they're the next lot over, or maybe a couple of lots, but it's their neighborhood. But they don't get the mailed notices. And we have a lot of condominiums in the city. And you know, all of those people who live in the condominiums, you know, could be and usually are very interested in what's going on around them. They don't get notified because it's only the condominium association that gets the notice. And those condominium associations, homeowners associations, don't necessarily, and as far as I can tell, don't usually pass that notice on to their members. So, you know, a lot of people have complained that they've been completely taken by surprise about, you know, different things that go through the zoning board, the planning board. And so I'm concerned about, you know, number one, you know, taking the notice out of the newspaper. And I understand a lot of people, you know, the number of people who read the Telegraph are probably less. You know, there's no question they're less than they used to be. You know, I happen to be a subscriber, and you know, I look at that faithfully every Sunday. But you know, it's the only thing we got, and to take away that notice in order to save some money, you know, the cost. You know, the right for the public to know what's going on. I mean, I'm constantly getting, you know, hearing people complain about how they have no idea what's going on in the city, and in particular your department, you know, the zoning board and the planning board. So, you know, have you thought about that, and have you thought about a way of replacing that? And I noticed that, you know, you talk about signage, but then for the historic district, you're talking about eliminating signs, you know, unless it's limited to, I think it was four properties, or, you know, if it only affected 4 properties, otherwise you're not putting signs out. So it sounds like you're, you know, I'm not saying it's your intention, but the consequence of what you're doing, you know, reducing the time from 10 days to 5 days,
So, Alderman
eliminating
Jettie,
some of the signage.
Kind of a committee.
I would say that's more of a debate that we're going to have to bring up when the motion to either pass it or
Okay.
table it
Well,
comes
there is a
up.
question there.
Yeah, so let's get the question, and then we can bring it up. I'm sure Sam's sticking.
Yeah, I'm happy
Manager
to
Durfee's
wait
sitting
for
around.
the committee meeting, if that's your preference.
No, you can ask your question.
Yeah, so the question is, have you thought about that, and have you come up with any way of replacing that notice so that people will know what's going on and they're not caught by surprise?
Yes, so we certainly did consider this, and it's not a decision or not something that we contemplated lightly. We recognize the value of noticing as broadly as possible, but also within reason. And we do find that, obviously, with the changing of the times, not as many people are reading the Telegraph. It's not as effective as a notice vehicle, and it was kind of a cost-benefit analysis. You know, when you're, you know, year over year, you're looking at north of $10,000 in newspaper notices. How many people are reading the notices? And then we looked at our other notification methods. We'll start with the mailers. You bring up the condominiums, which I think is a very good point. We talked a lot about this. It is very dependent on the HOA the association, and how that is governed, and how news is shared amongst the owners within the association. We don't have any control over that. Now, say there is a proposal at the zoning board for a lot that abuts a 50-unit condominium. The lot may only abut 10 of the condominium units. Notice, of course, goes to the HOA. Now the entire HOA theoretically is notified. Whether or not that is disseminated to all of the owners, that is incumbent on the HOA to do that. We are following state statute. So then we get back to the argument of, does the Telegraph notice kind of pick up that slack? we don't have the data, we can't make that informed decision. So what we see as the middle ground, the fix, is that signage. So should anyone be leaving the condominium development and drive past the abutting lot, they'll see these notices that are posted in the front lawn. And that, I think, would hope, catch their eye. They would inquire, they would call, and we do get calls from people saying, oh, we saw the sign, could you tell us what that's about? And we're happy to answer those questions. So it really does come down to a cost-benefit analysis. And I think that the signage that we do, and this is above and beyond state statute, it's something that we have found to be effective over the years. I think that does kind of fill that gap.
Okay.
So,
Could I have a follow-up? What about the historic district? Why are you reducing the signage
Yes.
there?
So so this is required for the rezoning. The reduction is rezoning if the proposed rezoning would affect 5 or fewer lots. So that's, 5 or fewer lots can be a very small area. There's a lot of history behind this and how we've conducted land use over the years. And I will say that this is more or less a Band-Aid as we are entering basically an overhaul of our land use code, and we will be reevaluating some of these operating procedures. But based on what we've seen in rezonings, as Alderman Moran can attest to, we recently had a rezoning up on Amherst Street, which was a large area. There was quite a few lots. A rezoning fewer than 5 lots is very rare, because that could be construed as spot zoning, which is not a good practice in planning. Very hyper-focused local rezoning for whatever purposes is not very. It's more of a decision that's made in a vacuum for maybe a specific project. So we try to avoid that. So that's why we wouldn't even consider rezoning anything fewer than 5 lots. So therefore, we wouldn't need a notification standard for fewer than 5 lots, because it's just something that we really wouldn't consider.
let's hold the rest until we actually bring up the motion, because we want to get the public testimony and then get into the regular meeting, if that's
Okay.
okay. If everyone else could also. Thank you, Manager Durfee. All right.
Thank you.
So I'll call it anyways, but we'll see if anyone's in favor and from the public who wants to testify. None. In opposition? In favor? In opposition? Seeing no one, the public hearing for O23-059 was declared closed at 7:17 PM. And the regular meeting resumes right away at 7:17. Since it's a joint committee meeting for the rest of the duration, Alderman Lopez is the co-chair and he's also clerk. Mike, do you have to retake attendance? Do you have to retake attendance?
Yes, because you closed
No,
one,
well,
you closed one meeting and started another.
yeah, take the
Come or
minutes.
gone, yeah.
Yeah.
Alderman Lopez, can you recall the roll?
Yep. Alderman at Large Melvin Moran Jr.
Present.
Alderman at Large Michael B. O'Brien Sr.
Present.
Chair. Alderman June M. Karen.
Here.
Alderman at Large Ben Clemens. Alderman Derek Tebow.
Yep.
Alderman Lopez is here. Alderwoman at Large Shoshana Kelly.
I'm here.
Also vice chair.
The Vice Chair. Alderman at Large Gloria Timmons. Alderman Patricia Klee, also clerk.
Here,
And in addition, we have Alderman at Large Wilshire, Alderman Jettie, and the rest that we mentioned earlier. Sorry. As we join the discussion of unhoused outreach and unsheltered residents, feel free to come and grab a seat around the table, wherever you would like. Director, no, Manager Durfee, you can stay, because I don't think you have anything to add, right?
well, he's going, when we talked about the ordinance,
Oh, but that'll be the next, that's further on.
yeah.
And then, Fire Marshal, if you want to come up too, feel free to have a
We
seat.
have questions.
And Director Hannum, sit tight, you're next. Thank you all for joining us to talk about the in-house outreach and unsheltered residents here in the city, especially given the past changes with COVID-era funds running out. The city's been experiencing, and not just the city, the state, and I'm pretty sure the nation, a crisis of unhoused residents, and it's been boiling over in the country for quite some time. But our Department of Public Health, City Welfare, Planning, Economic Development, and all these other great departments have been working hard to resolve some of the emergent issues that have been having here in the city, and we just wanted to hear what else is going on, how we can support you, and if there's anything you need from us to help communicate to our constituents. And I would gather that Chief Bagley's the lead here, so unless someone else. Everyone else has their head down, Chief.
They're not making eye contact, I think it's you.
Director.
Oh, it's Chief or Director? I thought
So the.
Chief
the
Public Health
title-
Officer.
The title is Chief Public Health Official, the role is Director,
Okay.
still the Director.
I
So-
feel it's, that Chief is at your level. That,
Same thing as when President is here, but she's also an at-large, so.
that, Director Bagley.
All right. Director Bagley, Division of Public Health and Community Services. I'm here this evening to talk about some of the efforts that we put in place in response to what we've been seeing as an increase in the unhoused population in this city. And so what we've been able to do is really do an alignment of our municipal entities with our divisions and our departments to respond to what we've been seeing with engagement of public health, with our community development, with our city departments, including emergency management with fire and police, as well as with other community agencies that have been working with individuals that have been unhoused. Most of the individuals that have been experiencing homelessness, we've also identified as folks that have mental health or behavioral health issues, as well as maybe experiencing some substance use disorder. So it calls for, a pretty wide approach, and again, with the alignment of all of those entities to address this complex issue. It's not anything that's new. It's been going on in the city for quite a while now. I would say with the increase in individuals that were exited from the hotels when there was the change with the rental assistance that ended back in April, and then in June, we knew that there was going to be an increase in folks that were going to have issues with homelessness. So some of our efforts started to begin then focusing on what are going to be some of the strategies that we're going to put in place to address the population, see if we could get services and have some more intense attention paid to individuals. As you know, we had the big encampment that was over at the Temple Street, over by the railroad. And then we had the information that was provided to us with regards to CSX needing, CSX, say that 3 times fast, wanting to have folks move so they could do some work, working together at an area in the city was identified of where folks would be temporarily placed, of which probably about 15 individuals ended up down in that area. We did have a public hearing or a public meeting, or what do we want to call that, gathering? Led by our
Board meeting.
Alderwoman June Karen to give the neighborhood an opportunity to voice concerns because of the moving in of individuals in the encampments. It was done relatively swiftly because once we received information about what the railroad folks wanted to do, we needed to get folks out so they could be in a safer place. The location at on Crown Ave is a temporary location, and with the couple of different things that have happened, there was the intention of looking at how we could move things along faster with getting people housed so we could get them moved along in either treatment, recovery, whatever other things that they felt they had need of, right? And just most recently, the opportunity came through using some of our opioid abatement funds to move folks into some hotels. So those have been some of the changes that have happened as of late, with the intentionality, again, of that being temporary, with the real goal of getting people housed. The issue that we're facing in Nashua and across New Hampshire, across the country, is the issue of housing, or the lack thereof. Without stable housing, people aren't going to be able to take care of their health. They're not going to be able to sustain their health. They're not going to be able to sustain any mental health or behavioral health or even substance use disorder treatment. So our focus right now is to do as much as we can with identifying housing, stabilizing folks so that we can get the services that people need, being able to meet people where they are as well, because there have been a lot of challenges, a lot of processes that are in place that actually prevent people from being able to get into stable housing as quickly as they can. So I hope that's a good overview, and if there's some more specific questions as to how things have been playing out as of late, those are welcomed as well. Right now, there have been probably 10 people, 12 people that have been placed in Motel 6 for right now, with the goal of identifying those couples that have vouchers that we can get connected to housing, or those that are looking to make a plan for medically assisted therapy to get them connected as well and find some housing in the community for folks. There's probably about, I want to say at my last interaction with folks, probably about 6 to maybe 8 folks that are still at the site on Crown Ave, Crown Street, but then we still have a number of individuals that are throughout the community and encampments, some that are known and some that are unknown. So we do have a large number of folks that we're working with regards to moving them along in this process of helping to find some stable housing for folks.
Well, kudos to you and your team. When I was at the community meeting last week, it was a much higher number there. To get people rapidly rehoused, even in temporary shelter, is quite an achievement for the city in such a short order period of time. One thing I had a question about, and then I'll open it up to others who might want to add, and Director Sullivan may know more about this one, but we have the inclusionary housing, is it the median income 80%?
Am I 80%?
Yes, am I? And that, basically, it's new builds have to have a certain percentage of low income, not low income, 80% of the median income. And I wonder if, I know it's hard to get developers in even with that, lowering it further down to actually be low income. I'm not sure, you could speak to the barriers of that, or?
Yeah, if I may, Mr. Chair, just before I answer that question directly, I do want to just say that we're excited about the opportunity to talk to this joint body this evening about the developments, particularly at Crown Street. And I think, just to be fair, we're likely going to respond most productively to questions directly about what's happening on that property, the ongoing developments there, and the efforts to rapidly rehouse individuals related to that encampment. And so, to that end, if any questions that are directed to Director Bagley and Mr. Mack, myself, other city staff as part of this conversation, I just want to make it clear that this is an ongoing dialogue, and so likely this evening, if you ask us questions about certain housing opportunities or funding sources, I want to apologize in advance if we seem a little bit dismissive, but we're actively working to try and actually lay out a more comprehensive plan. So we're going to be having a more ongoing conversation with this body and other groups as well, and so, pardon us if we seem a bit dismissive, but we're trying to work on those next steps beyond what's happening at the encampment right now, and so.
That's completely okay. It's an evolving situation, and I'm sure we'll have many questions because I think everyone around this table, raise your hand if you don't agree, wants to help our residents, both housed and unhoused.
Yeah.
And it all starts with open communication dialogue between one body of government with the other.
I appreciate that, Mr. Chair. And so to answer your question directly, folks may remember that we're involved in the inclusionary zoning and its drafting and its passing, that lower incomes were certainly considered as part of that conversation. Put this in the category of things that we probably want to have a longer dialogue with this group about. There are challenges with doing that. It makes things less developable in some cases. It makes the equation, if you will, of development a bit more challenging. But certainly, community needs to change, and so put that in that category of things that I think certainly should be part of one of the possible solutions to a larger term conversation on housing. But I just mean to say there are certainly implications to that. But, you know, again, we'd love to come back and talk about that at a later time with this group and another group as well.
Absolutely, okay. Alderman Tebow, then Alderman Lopez, then Alderman Clee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hope, Director Sullivan, you're not dismissive about this, because I'm going back in the past, not in the future, not in the present. So, as any board of any city or town knows, that when people aren't told about what's happening, people can freak out and not really understand the situation that's coming before them. And I say all this with a ton of support for our public health and everybody that works at the city. I think we do a great job here, or you guys do a great job. I don't do anything. But it's, you know, as aldermen that represent wards, like Ward 8 is far removed from downtown, and even I was starting to hear things about it, and false things about it, because people are using this as a political football now, because it's an issue that can be used against the city, right? City's not doing enough, what are they doing? And lots of derogatory things that I'm not really gonna repeat. And so I find it that, and I know it had to happen quick, but there had to have been a way that the aldermen could have been told ahead of time, and that we could start getting out there and work the crowd. I mean, you know, and as much of the abutters as we possibly could, whether, you know, any one of us may have raised our hand to walk. I know, you know, I know he's not an alderman, but candidate Tim Sennett, who lives in that area, would have more than happy to help out with the message to get out there, and maybe the other candidate would have as well. But I think, you know, the first thing is getting out the right news, right? This is what's happening, this is why it's happening. Because, you know, on the way here, I stopped into the Bright Spot, which is a little store on East Dunstable Road. And I saw one of my close peers, Michael O'Brien. We regularly go there to sneak a candy or something that our diabetic bodies don't like. Sorry, Mrs. O'Brien, and hopefully my wife isn't watching. But as we were there, we were in line, and we were talking to the woman behind the counter, and she says to us, "Do you know what they're doing in Nashua? They have homeless people living on Crown Street and like in an area right outside people's homes, like 500 feet from people's homes. There's a man that just had a baby there, and he can't believe that these people are there. There's drugs all over the place." Now, the problem is she's hearing it from someone who's hearing it from someone who's hearing it, false information, right? And so, you know, me and Mike are there trying to convince her, you know, tell her what we think is happening. But, you know, again, now it's two words against each other, and we didn't have the right information to go and say, this is what's going on, this is what's happening. And so there's a lot of misinformation out there with people that live in the city. And some people use some of this stuff, and they believe it's scary. They think, you know, I've heard, oh, homeless, they're violent. And that's just not true. The violence has come more from the other side than it has been from the people that are unsheltered. You know, and we certainly want to find a way to help them, but it's hard to when we're getting really bad information from people that just don't understand the situation or the problem. So I don't know if there was a way to get that information to us quicker or find a way to tell the abutters, but I think that was the key piece at first, is that everybody was freaking out and we couldn't really control it. And then it spun into this meeting where poor Alderman Karen had to have, and I heard that, you know, it was quite an uproar in that meeting, which probably, maybe rightfully so, I don't know. But I was just, I guess my question there is, how can we make sure that we're getting information so we can support the city better with the constituents that we have out there throughout the city?
Who would like to field that question?
I'm happy to at least
Don't be
offer-
dismissive.
Director Sullivan.
I'm not suggesting that I'll be dismissive in any way. I mean only to suggest that I think there's additional information needed on some of the questions that will come up tonight. But I think, I don't want to speak for city staff, but I can certainly say for myself, having attended the meeting last week, having been involved with some of these conversations, communication is something that we were very cognizant of, but I think we're all in agreement that we need to be very, very sensitive to moving forward based on some of the communication that did and did not happen as part of the initial setup of the encampment. I don't need to sit here and say that we were working very diligently, because I think everyone around this horseshoe knows that, and everyone knows that the situation was rapidly evolving. But I go back to some comments that I believe Director Bagley and another director at the meeting made last week, and that is, we were very sensitive in this particular instance, and this is a response and not an excuse. We were very sensitive in this instance to the fact that the safety and security of not only these individuals, but also the surrounding neighbors was of the utmost importance. And so we took great care in the way that information was communicated to not immediately sensationalize any of what was happening as part of this situation, as part of the setup of infrastructure, as I'll refer to it, at the Crown Street site. I won't deny the fact that there could have been more direct outreach to certain individuals and parties and groups that were involved, but ultimately, the rapidly moving nature of the situation and the fact that, you know, we wanted to be sure that the safety and security of all parties involved was respected, we did not ultimately feel that a broad-based outreach announcement was prudent. I'm not saying that's what you're suggesting, Alderman Tebow, but even the level of outreach that you're suggesting, I think we all see there could have been value there, but in the moment, we did not feel it was appropriate. And so I think we recognize that. We've lived through the experience of the setup of the infrastructure that took place there. You know, there may be further messages that need to be conveyed to the public, and I can only assure you that we'll take great care when that time comes to try and, you know, use what we've learned to do a better job. But that may not necessarily mean that there'll be broad-based communication. It just might be more strategic in nature. And I hope that is an answer, because I really, you know, I hear what you're saying, but I think it was a challenging message to convey without sensationalizing the situation.
Follow up?
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, I mean, do you think it became sensational? Because, you know, somebody on the other side did shoot a gun off and get into an argument with one of the unsheltered, right? Do we feel that ended up being as safe as it could be, or could it have been worse than that? I mean, and at the lowest sense, could you at least think that maybe, I am not saying, again, like you said, I'm not saying, you know, make sure an email blast goes to 90,000 citizens, but 15 aldermen? I don't know, that they're gonna have to field those questions and be prepared with, you know, and I know it's hard to write up talking points when you're trying to do something quickly, so I can understand not being able to deliver us with a set of talking points or anything, but a heads up, so we're like, you know, I'm not wandering around with people going, hey, you hear about this? And I'm like, no, I have no clue. Let me look into it. And the weekend, I'm like, oh, great, no, you know, no one's gonna be around now. And so, I think at least to that extent, it would be nice, or at least, I don't know, it'd be good, I guess.
And I can add to that, I think, speaking individually to my colleagues, the frustration of not knowing and not being able to have answers for our constituents. And I've said this last night, and I said this at other points, you know, it's not the Board of Aldermen's job to manage you or any of you. That's the mayor's job. We're here to support and fund projects or get communication back so we can talk to our constituents, because even when there's a pothole, you know, aldermen get contacted first before the Board of Public Works or the form on the website. We're usually the first contact for quite a many amount of people. And just a phone call to, if it involves infrastructure, Alderman O'Brien could get a call, planning, me, human affairs, of course, Alderman Lopez, and we could talk to our colleagues from there. And we're not, hindsight is 20/20, but I think the administration needs to know the frustration that many of us had felt in this unsheltered process.
And I'll respond just to say that I've had individual conversations, I think, with nearly everybody around the Horseshoe about this, and Alderman Moran, Alderman Tebow, your comments they're common to many of the folks around here, and certainly, you know, we appreciate your support through this situation, when maybe that communication could have been improved, but, you know, I can assure you we're talking internally about how to make sure that's improved moving forward, or certainly recognize this issue and tweak what needs to be tweaked within our communication about issues as sensitive as this one moving forward.
Well, I appreciate you hearing that.
Yeah.
I think, Alderman Lopez.
Yeah, so I'm going to break ranks a little bit here. As an alderman with a pretty dense urban area, I routinely find out that there are encampments next to people's property from the people who are there. This is not an experience that is unique to the Crown Hill area at all. And as the alderman for those areas, I typically relay that information to public health and to different nonprofits that I've cultivated a relationship, because I'm an alderman. I represent the neighborhoods that are there, and I want to make sure that all of our residents are safe and being cared for. So I do feel for the shock of people who haven't encountered this before, but I would encourage residents who do see unsheltered people to understand that they're not alone, and that we are doing a lot of work as a city to try to intervene and to try to stabilize these situations and try to manage the safety. I don't think enough can be said about how much Nashua Police has invested in trying to self-educate, try to reach out, try to connect, try to build partnerships, not just in recent years, but over time, because they want to make sure that there's neighborhood safety. And public health is a major part of that as well, trying to establish, any number of safety factors, whether it's making sure we don't have an outbreak of hepatitis or the flu or any of these other things that can be happening in addition to dealing with all these different things. Public health has maintained an outreach program for years. Director Bagley Lewis is a hero. He's out there all the time engaging with people. You have a lot of staff members who really know the community and are really appreciated and welcomed wherever they're doing. In addition to the specific outreach, there's also the other outreach programs like driving the health van around and making sure underserved areas are being engaged. These are things I know about as an alderman because I need to know them and I need to pass them on to my constituents. And I think all of us here have an obligation, while we're asking the city staff to be more direct and specific with things that might arouse public interest, to also be engaged and maintain those relationships so that we're not so far out of the way when these decisions are being made, and we do have resources or ideas or supports to bring to the table. Because this situation, while it did erupt in that specific area at Crown Hill, it's not new, and it's not likely to be immediately resolved. Even if we find resources and we're able to place some people into temporary situations, a lot more work has to be done, and I know Director Bagley knows that. I know that's why a lot of the city staff are reluctant to unveil larger plans or reassurances, because it's a complex situation and we need to put a lot of resources together and build on programs that are very complicated in and of themselves. The conversation about what Director Mack does alone with the coordinated entry system and the number of different organizations and agencies that are operating tonight to house people, to shelter people, to stabilize them, that's not one meeting. That's a continuing series of meetings. And I've been very vocal about inviting aldermen to the continuum of care meetings. I've encouraged them to go to the Board of Public Health meetings, where every month we talk about the identified number of people that we are working with in various levels of support, what it's costing the taxpayers, and what the strategies are that are being used. That's not necessarily a red flag or an alarm bell being rang. This is people doing their jobs, doing their work, and helping in the community. And it's something we all need to keep our pulse on as much as we want the city staff to be able to tell us. If the city staff have to respond to a short-term situation that emerges and there isn't necessarily a great alternative or situation, they can't necessarily always do it by committee. That's our job. And while we definitely want and are appreciative that you're here tonight to talk to us, to the committees, to make sure that we're in the loop, I do think it's important that we also proactively engage and make sure that we're being there as a partner, not as a finger pointer or a blamer or any of those things. So I would like to hear a little bit more from the police about the kind of efforts that you've done.
Oh, that's fine.
Oh, fire, please, yeah.
Police couldn't make it. They're in a conference training.
Well, if you have anything to add, maybe Director Bagley, you could talk a little bit about the crisis response efforts that the police have been coordinating with, particularly like the mental health crisis interventions and the training of officers, that kind of stuff.
So one of the things that we have partnered with the police department and on is our response to some of the mental health calls that they may get at their department, because we've partnered with them with our behavioral health team, which has been working pretty well. We've had 2 of our staff, our licensed clinical social worker and our master's prepared behavioral health person spend at least 40 hours during the course of the week with our Nashua PD and respond to calls that they deem appropriate for them to be there. Some of those have even, overlapped with situations that may not seem like it will require, a crisis, but when any individual has some type of traumatic thing that happens, that's a stressor for them. And so our staff is able to be with the police when they respond and help individuals cope with that particular situation. Some of them have been very serious calls that they have responded to. And I think it's, can't think of the word, but I think the staff availing themselves to working in partnership this way with the police department, is a great attribute for our city and how we're responding right now. And that's not to take away from anything anybody else is doing with mobile crisis with our Greater National Mental Health, but it's an additional effort that we put in place because, again, there were gaps. And so when we're working together, when we align ourselves to be immediate in a response to what we're seeing in our community, I think it's a good thing.
I think it's a great thing. And I think it's important for people to remember because as much as we can talk about the taxpayer roles and the aldermanic roles and the communication and everything, the people we really need to focus on in talking about the homeless are the homeless. And that is not a pleasurable way of life or a deliberate life choice or, we can talk about, well, some people make these choices or these choices, and we can apply whatever label we want to dehumanize them, but it is very stressful being homeless. Nobody loses everything they have or breaks all of the relationships that they have trying to be sheltered and then goes and lives in a tent and feels like it's a nice night out, things are going great. It's a very difficult time, and I think having our police there to manage public safety while also being trained to be compassionate and engaging and understanding is very important, and I think that will make this problem get much, much better in addition to all the resources that we're doing, because when our frontline people are knowledgeable, engaging, and can be trusted, then the people who most need to make these decisions and engage in these programs are more willing to do that. So I think that's a great step that you've been doing. The community health worker expansions, all the collaborations that you've been doing, like I said, I think that can't be credited enough, and I think you're doing a great job.
Thank you, Alderman Lopez.
Alderman Clee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm going to start off a little bit on the negative side and then kind of go very positive, but adding on without piling on to what Alderman Thibault and Alderman Moran had said. If we could somewhat going forward, let us know what's going on. I understood what happened. I know things happen fast. I knew there would be movement of those individuals. I had been in at a meeting where I'd heard CSX say, you have to the end of the month. So, I knew that everything was, people's feet were on fire. So I understood that. But I'll be honest with you, on Sunday, I was sitting at the Center for the Arts, and all of a sudden a patch report came up and said, people moved to Motel 6. And the mayor was there. So I ran right over to him and went, want to talk to me about it? Kind of put his feet to the fire and said, I want to know. And so we had a little bit of a conversation, but I would like to know at least at the same time the patch is knowing. I don't know I don't know if we did a press release. I assume we didn't, that somebody called them and said this was happening, and that's how they got it. I know it was in the union leader. And much like the other aldermen, I get phone calls. I'm going to turn around and say, I'm sorry, I don't know at this time, but I'll find the information. I don't blame anybody, and I'm not blaming anybody. Trust me. You guys are doing a phenomenal job. So I apologize for being even a little bit negative here, but just kind of moving forward, if we could get a heads up. Same time, I know we get the press releases from the police at the same time the press is getting them. So, but at least we know what's going on. So if something like that happens, just kind of keeping that in the future. And then I have kind of like a couple of comments to add to what Alderman Lopez said about the, if I may, I'm sorry, I apologize. Finding encampments. Truthfully, I've seen them too, and I actually call Alderman Lopez to say there's seems to be an encampment here, or I've got to report that there's an encampment there. He's my go-to person for that, and he'll say to me, he'll pass the information on and so on. So I know as a city, we are working collaboratively. I know this is not the only encampment. It was just a very large one that had to be moved quickly. It was bad circumstances and so on. But I can tell you from someone who spent quite a bit today on social media with people saying, well, what are you guys doing? You've been there for 6 years, or for this many years. You were up in the State House. What are you doing? And truthfully, I wrote this very, very long message about the things that we are doing, some of the things that I worked with. I was very disappointed to hear a candidate say that all we have to do is fix mental health and we fix the homeless. And wouldn't it be nice if we had a magic wand to be able to do all that? And that's not how this works. We don't just fix one. And if I'm hearing things properly, you guys have a multiple amount of balls in the air trying to work at some kind of solution, and that might only just fix one of the little problems, and then you have to move on to the next and so on. So having said that, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, I wasn't able to go to the meeting. I was actually in the hospital when you had the meeting in Ward 7. I'd just like to hear what our plan was. I know it was a very loose plan, but what our plan was, because it really was a temporary. This whole thing has been a temporary till we can find permanent housing. So I've heard bits and pieces of it. If you wouldn't mind, what was the idea? It was to move them there temporarily to make sure that there was some kind of sanitation there, police, so on. We're going to be monitoring. I know Director Bagley, I've talked to you personally. I know your people were going out there. You were going out there at night. If you could just kind of talk to the people that are hearing it that weren't at that meeting, if I'm not putting you too much on the spot, as to kind of what our idea and our thinking was.
Director Bagley.
Yeah, so I'm in a space, because it seems like we're targeting this population, and I'm hearing, we want to know what's happening with this population, as if, I just,
May I?
Yes.
this is.
I agree with you. I agree with you, and I apologize for it coming out that way. It sounds like we're just.
Well, I mean, it's not just you, Alderman Clee. We are fixated and targeting a population of folks. And I don't know. I'm just in a space. I'm sorry. This is,
May I?
Yeah.
if you want to speak, you
I'm-
can.
I'm happy.
I just don't think this is fair, that we want to know what's happening with this population of folks when they're moving. Send me a notification. We need to know everything that's happening with this population of folks. And I want to know why. Why are we targeting the homeless population, this one particular group of population, when we've had homeless individuals in this community for years? And now, and I understand the sensitivity around what happened at Crown Street, but now we want to know what's happening with this population, every move and everything that we do. I'm trying to understand that. And then help me understand what information you need to know and when you need to know it. Because there's some things that we can't talk about. So I want to know why this particular population is being targeted at this particular time. And if it seems like I'm just I'm just in that space right now, I apologize if folks can't receive that. But this population is stigmatized enough, and we're just doing it more.
May I?
Yes.
You're right. You're 100% right with everything you said. We are targeting this particular one, and I apologize for it to come off like that, because I know we have encampments in Mine Falls, and we have encampments various other places in the city. And as an alderman, I hear about those particular ones, and I've reached out to Alderman Lopez and said, what are we doing? This particular one, I think the reason for us at Alderman being kind of like feeling like we were blindsided was because it was so controversy. So you are 100% right. It does feel like we are targeting this group of people. And truthfully, I want to see this group, I want to see any other group get programs. That's why I mentioned the comment about that you have many balls in the air, because you're not just trying to fix this problem here on Crown Street. You're trying to fix the homeless, the mental health population throughout the entire city. So that's why I had said it. This particular one, I'm sorry if you feel that you are being targeted, or they're being targeted, I should say. But as an alderman, as a person who is an elected official, we are getting those phone calls. And when we're blindsided and we don't know how to answer, it's not that we come off sounding like we're completely clueless or anything like that. It just kind of gives a heads up. This is coming down the road. The newspapers are going to go for it, and they're going to twist it. Social media is going to go there, and they're going to twist it. What it does is it gives us the opportunity to make the focus on their negativity and so on in a more positive way. Everything you said is 100% accurate. Why focus in on this? We shouldn't be. You're right. We should not be focusing on this. When we have this problem throughout the city, we have it in various areas and so on. The problem that I have, and I don't mean to sound negative, is just that when I get blindsided by this, and I'm suddenly having people answer questions, I want to support you. I want to support everything that the city is doing, because I think the city is doing a phenomenal job. Our homeless population in the state has over doubled. I'm sure that Nashua has even, and Manchester have gone even more than over doubled. We can't keep up, we can't do with capacity and so on, but if we know what's coming down the pike, if we know everything that's being happened, we can help you. And we can get some of those monkeys off your back. We can get some of that negativity so you can do your job without having to feel that you are being attacked by us or by anybody. So, no, you are 100% right. We should not be focusing just on this area. That is not just the only important area. But if we don't know what's happening, we can't help you.
And,
So-
and I don't feel like I'm being attacked. I'm
No,
just-
thank you.
It's just the emphasis on this particular population, to me, just seems, the issue is housing. We need to be addressing the housing issue. The folks
I
can't
agree.
help that they're homeless if they don't have places to go.
And also
May-
too,
may-
these unhoused residents are still residents. They're also our constituents. And
And they're
If-
voters,
Yes.
just
and
reminding them.
they have been vilified
Yes.
to the extreme. Some of the things that I've saw at that community meeting heard, and other things that I saw online. And the more information that we have to combat misinformation, I mean, they were calling these people pedophiles, drug addicts. I've had my own words with people who've called me and said, what are you going to do with these people? I'm like, these people are your neighbors now. We are going to help them just like we would like help a multi-million-dollar BAE system taxpayer, because they all deserve equal treatment by the city. And they have a right to be defended by their elected officials. The fact that homelessness is not new, but they've been demonized on WMUR and by their shot at and these other aspects. I would love to be prepared with facts as much as possible, beyond what I already know in my profession, to help them. And it's not anything, some people are just cruel.
May I just continue, just for a few more moments. Director Bagley, I agree with you, it is housing. And I think the fact that it was brought up about the 80% AMI and so on, and was kind of, let's not be dismissive of that, but I think that's really where we do need to go. I think this conversation could expand if we could talk about that. Personally, I sent Director Sullivan and a text message saying that I went to a meeting today and found out that Hudson got rid of their elderly housing ordinance that allows for age restriction. I'd love to be able to do that and open up more space for people of all ages, of people that, of lower income housing and so on. I would like to be very creative. I'd like to get the 80% down to 60, 40, whatever it is that we need to get down. I know that Alderman Kelly is also been talking about how we need to intermix and not just put people all within one area and so on. So I agree, and I'd love that conversation to happen here, but I don't think that that's what's going to happen. I think that's probably a conversation for, kind of got the impression, for another day at another time. My only issue about that, and I'm not trying to direct it at you in a particular way, I just wanted to I want the public to know that this is a temporary situation. We are doing everything we can, whether it's for someone in Mine Falls, or someone that's in Greeley Park, or someone that's in Crown Hill. We are doing everything we can. I know that Alderman Lopez talks to me about the head counts and knowing where these groups of individuals are living and so on. And I want the public to hear that we are aware of any and all groups and that we are doing everything we possibly can. This was just a crisis. We could have not done anything and just let everybody go wherever they wanted to go. But we were more humane. And we set up a situation, I think, which was a good thing. I don't think it was a bad thing. I think it was a humane thing to do, because these are people. So, again, I apologize if I came off sounding like I was on the attack, because I really wasn't.
Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you. First, I would like to thank Ward 7 Alderman Karen for hosting that particular meeting. I was in attendance, several other aldermen were there. And it was the right format, you know, to hear from the people, some of their concerns and everything. Some of it argumentally was founded and, you know, some of it not so much founded. I know there was a concern of 1,000 feet near a school, and I went on the GIS, and that's more than 1,000 feet away from school. But, you know, this is right now, I think time is everything. And unfortunately, we have an election coming up November 7th. So something like this has probably raised to a level where it probably may not have been so much on the front burner as it probably would have been, you know, in another time. But that being said, I think now is the proper thing to get the correct information out there. Now, I was taught by a former Alderman, Brian McCarthy, you know, if you really want to represent the people well, you know, get off your duffer, and Brian used to go down and walk the parks of particular areas and everything else like that. And I walked this area down there to find out how the people were making out. I don't encourage the public to do so, because these people deserve their space too. The state of New Hampshire has a far different description of what a domicile is than probably what traditional people come to realize. This is their home. But what I did find is that the people there once identified themselves with my very nifty ID badge here, you know, that they were great, they communicated well, they provided me with information and different things, and got to hear a lot of their concerns. And so, and then shortly after that came Alderman Karen's meeting. But today I read in the Union Leader, due to the unfortunate lack of the Telegraph, but they did have an article on how we're dealing with it. So my question in all this is to you, Director Sullivan. Can you rehash, because I think the time now is to deal with the facts of the situation, and basically, I don't know if you made that statement to the Union Leader, or did it come via the mayor's office, or who actually did do it. But I found it to be not the ultimate solution, but it shows how we as a city are doing our job and solving this particular situation that was thrown upon us. You know, CSX owns the property. They have the right to allow people to stay on it or not, you know. And yet we try to do the best in a temporary solution. And this Crown Hill facility seemed to work out the best. But now I see that now we're trying to get them. Weather's turning cooler. I am concerned. My part of me that is a firefighter, when people get cold, I don't want them doing anything irrational and that affects their life safety, you know, particularly in a tent. A tent is hard to keep warm. So I see in the paper, though, Director Sullivan, that the Union Leader did say that the city is moving and trying to work to close down, and that we are putting some of the people into Motel 6. There is funding available. Can you dabble into a little bit of the funding so that the people understand that? And then also too, how we're kind of waiting for December 1st with the possibility of more beds becoming available. And let's get the truth out there and not the speculation. And I think that would help us out a lot here. Do you have any thoughts on that? This is your moment to shine, that's all.
Well, I'm not I appreciate that, Alderman O'Brien, but I certainly don't, I think it's an opportunity to correct the facts and talk about what we are doing versus what we're not. And Director Bagley will have to help me with the motel placement response to some extent, but I'm aware of the union leader article. But my response would be, we are, as a city, we are handling this in the same manner that we would any other critical, time-sensitive need that an individual or a group of individuals have. That's not to say that this is equal, more equal, less equal, if those concepts even exist, than any of those other problems, but I can assure you that we have formed a these are all the classic buzzwords, but it's true. We have formed multi-jurisdictional meetings, task forces around this issue. We are meeting regularly, and I mean regularly, daily, about responding to this problem. But to Director Bagley's comments, much like we would many other problems around the city. So this is not unique, and so I want to be careful targeting this initiative and saying that it's different than something else. What is different about it is that we have a very clear moment in time in early December that we're looking towards with concern, and we're doing our best to position not only ourselves but our other agency partners and the very individuals that we're talking about here to have an opportunity for housing throughout a season that we know will be challenging. That's what we're working on, full stop. We are working on a variety of different solutions. Some of that might be rapid rehousing through motel rooms, but I can assure you that every other option is on the table to us right now. And that's not to say that we don't know what direction we're heading in. We can't yet say exactly what that looks like, but you've given me an opportunity to sort of correct something you said, Alderman O'Brien. We are not waiting. We have approximately 40 days until, early December. That's time we cannot afford to waste. We're working 7 days a week, talking 7 days a week about this. We're working constantly and we're working as a team. I will just say that we all have a different area of expertise around this issue, and we're trying to bring those perspectives to it. Bobby and her team have been unbelievable. Chief Rourke, Director Cummins, Megan Karen, there are a bunch of folks we could thank for their efforts, but we are looking to bring some additional expertise in to help with this issue. We're currently hiring a position to assist with not only some of this response, but with some other broader housing issues. That's some of what we'd like to come back to talk to you about. So we know there's a real resource need that we're not filling right now, but I can only emphasize the criticality and the effort that's being put in, and I think that the Union Leader article did a decent job with the quotes that were in there and the statements that were in there reflecting that.
Yeah. Follow up, if I may. Would you like to discuss what was printed in the Union Leader on the funding and where some of the funds are coming?
Alderman O'Brien, if I could, I'd like to ask Director Bagley maybe to comment on that.
Yeah, and that would be adequate through the
Bagley.
chair. Yes.
All right, thank you. The funding source that we're using, so you're aware that there's been the opioid abatement trust fund that's been put in place. There are several states that are receiving the funding. New Hampshire happens to be one of them. There were at least 22 subdivisions in our state that actually are part of that settlement. Nashville just happens to be one of them as well. We have had this funding. We've been using the funding to support some of our community-based organizations that have been providing services to individuals that have substance use disorder. I was down at the encampment on Friday, and the temperature is starting to drop relatively quickly, and it was cold. It was cold on Saturday. I put in a request to the mayor to allow for some of the opioid abatement trust funds to be used for the rapid rehousing of getting some of the folks from that particular encampment And we had learned about this when this was identified as a temporary site, that it was going to be very cold down there, the wind, the wet. And now I was there on Friday, that's what it was. I was there Friday morning, the wind was blowing blowing the tents, it was cold. So an immediate action needed to be taken with regards to, again, health and safety of these individuals, and because of other things that were happening down there. So the proposal was put forth. The funding for the opioid abatement trust fund can be used for housing and supportive services for individuals who have substance use disorder. So that funding is what's right now supporting the individuals that are in the hotels. In the motel. It's not just the folks at the Crown Street encampment, though, that we need to find housing for. So those were the immediate ones that we could get into the space. These are couples who, shelters do not take couples. The ability for these folks to get into places was going to be a little bit difficult for them. Individuals, once the shelter space opens up, and that will take place hopefully sooner than December because the temperatures are getting colder, but this gave an opportunity to use some of the funds that we already have that's not related to any taxpayer dollars, any complications with regards to folks being upset about money being used to house folks. It's trust fund that will come through, and it's money that's created for this very purpose. And so that was what was actually used and will continue to be used as we look at housing folks going forward.
And I thank you both for your clarification to the question. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Alderman Karen, then Alderman Tebow?
Yep.
Then Alderman Kelly.
Thank you.
Actually, Karen, then Kelly, because Tebow already had a bite at the apple.
Thank you.
Sorry. My apologies.
Thank you. First of all, I came to the meeting tonight thinking that we were just going to get an update on housing and, this event that took place, which I appreciate very much. But I have to say that whatever happened, basically happened to me in my ward, and I've moved on. After I got the phone call, I talked to Director Bagley, and her and I worked very diligently to set up a quick meeting to try to get the neighbors there and to have a conversation, because I know very well that we have had homeless people for a very long time. It's just that this was not an area that you would see a lot of homeless people. Moving on, the other part of this is, no matter what you do, no matter what you say, and everyone who spoke that evening, I can't thank them enough, there will always be people there who do not understand that by the grace of God, go there. At any one time, any one of us could be in that situation. And I don't think I need to have my problem brought out in public. Conversations need to be made. How do we help these people? How do we help our neighbors? And that's what I was trying to bring across to the people within the Crown Hill area. Yes, it got out of hand a few times because of people who wanted to make this political. This is not political. This is your life. This is someone's life. We're trying to help. The people who work within city government are trying to help. My questions tonight basically were about some of the issues that the neighbors had concerning the sign, because of the dead-end street, because of people, probably shouldn't be there anyway. The light that was out, and they felt that it was unsafe for everybody, not just them, the neighbors. And the other thing was the fencing, and hopefully these things are still gonna get taken care of, because no matter what we do, there will always be someone camping out somewhere. You and I talked afterwards about someone finding an encampment down on Harbor Ave near Salmon Brook. So, we talked about it, and hopefully that someone went out to check on it, because the gentleman, he wasn't rude, he, said this is what was going on. I go by there all the time. I never noticed it. So, yes, I would have liked a head up. I don't do social media because that is the worst place you can go to find out anything because most of it isn't true. This thing about the shooting, I heard about the shooting the day it happened, and the story I was told by the police commissioner was totally different from what the media was saying and people were saying on social media. So that wasn't fair to the lady, and it wasn't fair to the gentleman who decided to do something stupid with a gun. And that's basically what it was. So I think I appreciate what you were able to do this week. What the state needs to do is give the money sooner to communities so they can open those beds, to put people in them so they're not out in the cold. But I think what we have to move forward from this. And working with you, and we have to do this in the right way. And we should not be making it about them and us. It's about what we can do for our community and the people who live here. Thank you.
Thank you for those great words, Alderman. Alderman Kelly.
Thank you. Now I have to follow that. Good job, good job.
And I didn't write it down.
I know I didn't write it down either because I've worked in homelessness for as long as I can remember. I worked on it in college, and I think it is a vast community issue. I think what I'm struggling with was the same thing that Director Bagley was struggling with in terms of how we're talking about this problem. This is a flash in the pan for us around this horseshoe, but there are people in this community who are working on this every single day. And if you notice, they're the ones that are quiet because they know that they're out there doing this work. I'm not at a board of, for the soup kitchen board to be here tonight. So there is work that's being done, and it's not, we're not gonna end homelessness tonight. It is, we have to look at the housing stock. What are we paying people? So many different things have to happen to slowly start to make a shift there. And I think what has been tough for some of us, as we've heard, is just a villainization of this population. We constantly talk about the drugs and the violence, and just because you're unhoused, that does not mean that that is what is going to happen within an unhoused and population or space. And I think that that's really tough for us to continue talking that way. So to shift the conversation to what can we do and how can we support the people in the city that are working on this, because they are working on it. We're here in this meeting and we hear a little bit every once in a while about what things are going on, but I know that Director Bagley is working on this every day. I know that Bob Mack is working on this every day. I talk to Matt 3 times a week about what are we doing with the Affordable Housing Trust Fund? How are we going to start to open up housing, get people, rapidly rehoused and then housed into spaces so they can stay in Nashua? And that's a big problem, and it's not a problem we're going to be able to fix today, maybe not tomorrow, but slow with short-term and long-term. So I think my personal feeling is that the city did a great job in handling the situation, having a community conversation about it, and moving it very quickly to a solution. There are encampments everywhere in the city. There are. And that is something that I'm sure everyone in this horseshoe would prefer not to have. And so we have to work in long and short term to make things change. I have some questions, but I'm going to let Alderman Tebow chat and then we'll go from there.
And just to add on to that too, I think it has to be an ongoing, continuing conversation to help all of the unhoused. And there's only a certain amount of what the city can do. We need state partnerships and private partnerships. Alderman Tebow.
We sure everybody that hasn't talked yet has talked or wants to talk?
Who wants to talk? Alderman Wilshire, are you?
All right.
I'm listening.
All right, thank
There is
you,
one more.
Mr. Chairman. So a couple things here. One, asking for something wasn't finger pointing. Certainly wasn't finger pointing. I'm not blaming anybody. I'm just asking that in the future we have something. And that goes for other issues, right? So police and fire, like somebody said, do a great job letting us know what's going on. I don't know how many times somebody said, hey, I heard of a fire. What do you know about it? This is what I know. or police issue or whatnot. So, there was no finger pointing there. It's just like, is there a way to get better? And I'm not asking for a war and peace. I'm not asking for, a huge document or I'm not asking for approval, us to approve anything or that. It's just that, we have citizens too that we have to speak for. We're a servant leadership. We serve our people. And it's hard to serve our people when we don't have information. So it's not a blame of anything gone wrong. It's talking more about the future, right? I'm not, pushing something behind because I want to talk about the past. I want to talk about the future of it. And again, it's not just this issue. I'm not trying to make this specific issue the issue. And I'm not looking to make every specific homeless issue this issue. Obviously I don't want sensitive things to be talked about, right? That's not the right way to do any of this stuff. I certainly wasn't dehumanizing anyone, and I don't think anybody in this room would dehumanize anyone that's at any of the camps or the encampments, or even if they're not at the encampments. No one in this horseshoe would dehumanize anyone. We got to worry about the people that are dehumanizing the people out there. That's the problem I have, right? Or the papers or people. We have a literal candidate for political office that said he would take everybody out. He would get rid of the homeless in that area. That's not the right approach to this problem, and you guys all know that. I'm preaching to the choir. If that person gets in office, I'll tell you, we won't have a thoughtful process here of how this works. And some of you guys won't be in office. Some of us may not be in office, right? And so that's going to take a bad turn for the people that we need to help most. So I'm not here to dehumanize anyone, and I'm certainly not here to blame anyone. At the Affordable Housing Forum a couple weeks ago, I was the only one that said we should have went further on the inclusionary zoning rule. I was also the one that said we need affordable housing in every part of the city. And I said, when I said affordable, I mean low rent / affordable in every part of the city, from the northwest corner of Amherst Street down to the Daniel Webster Highway to the middle of the city as well. And I got an applause for that. So it's important that, and I say that because I do support all of that. And I want to make clear that that's what I support. I am glad to know that Alderman O'Brien has given me a way to find out about city news now. All I got to do is read the Union Leader and I know what's going on in the city. So thank you for that. I will cancel my subscription to the Telegraph and quickly pick up the Union Leader from now on. Thank
Right,
you.
for my wife's benefit, if I may, Mr. Chair.
course.
I was picking up the paper and not candy at Price Plaza.
I did not see any candy. Thank you.
Alderman Jettie.
Thank you. So, listening to the discussion, I remember at the Ward 7 meeting, the mayor talked about, may have been others, but I remember the mayor saying that there were a certain number of beds becoming available December 1st. And, the problem was that it's the money that's going to be paid by this, I think, the state to the city on December 1st. So it occurred to me, we have a lot of money stashed away in different expendable trust funds, for example, or, there are surplus funds in various places. So it occurred to me, can't we borrow the money necessary to make those beds available immediately? Borrow that money from, one of these other funds and then pay it back when we get the money from the state. We did it recently we took money out of an expendable trust fund to come up with the funding to replace the lights at the Sergeant Avenue tennis courts. Couldn't we do something similar to help solve, help assist in this problem immediately rather than waiting for the money that's coming from the state? I assume that money is money in the bank, so to speak. We just haven't received it yet. So I don't know who could answer that, if anyone.
Alderman Jettie, are you asking if we can take money from a expendable trust fund and give it to the National Soup Kitchen and Shelter, who would be opening up these beds allow them to open up and staff them sooner than December 1st? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, whoever it is that's going to provide the beds, that's waiting for the money, yes.
Okay. Alderman, sorry, Director Sullivan or Director Bannon?
So I don't think it's just a matter of the funding coming from the state. So there is additional funding that the city is actually providing as well. It's staffing, it's them having the supplies, and they're working on that now. And so they're moving forward with some of those things already. So that's not necessarily the issue. Staffing capacity is one piece of that as well. So they have positions posted. They have to have the staffing there to provide the services for individuals. So, and then the shelter is one option. It's not going to be an option for everyone. The number of beds that they have is 24. The mission that we have, and Bob can attest to this, usually is full on a regular basis. From the count that the police had, there's up to about 70 individuals that are unhoused and living in the encampments. And that's not including other folks that are living in their cars, or folks that are doubling up in other people's homes that are, homeless as well. And so the National Soup Kitchen and Shelter is going to be able to provide some service to some folks, but there's still going to need to be more opportunity. 34 beds will help some people, but the funding is not necessarily the issue.
Director Sullivan?
The space is actually not yet complete either, as I understand it. It's currently under renovation, and so the timing, the December timing, is actually due to the work being completed to allow the people into the space. So funding is not the primary issue. Staffing and the completion of the space are the major impediments to those beds being available.
Thank you.
Alderman Lopez?
Director Bagley or Mac can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe December 1st is also the onset of the cold weather emergency rules for the state of New Hampshire, which means you're not creating new beds per se. You're recognizing that now there's a humanitarian crisis. Homelessness is really, really, really dangerous being outside when it's snowing or freezing weather. And so that's why the state has done that for all of this time. And those are typically full as well. So we don't want to count the same capacity twice and say, let's solve today's problem by pre-filling, because we're going to have the same problem later. So I think the holistic approach that Director Bagley and Director Sullivan have been trying to encourage us to take, rather than focusing on one nuance or one solution or one golden, gun, I think we need to look at this holistically.
Alderman Wilshire, then Alderman Kelly.
It'd be great if we could eradicate homelessness in the near future. What I see is that the cost of housing is so high that we're going to have more homeless people, not less. We're going to need more shelter beds, not fewer. That's just what I see. The price of apartments is so much. And there was a couple that I met, and they said, well, I work, and I just can't afford anything. That's why we live where we live. In my opinion, it's going to get worse, so we need to ramp things up even more.
Alderman Kelly.
I agree with that, Alderman Wilshire, and I know that's something that we're trying to do as a city. I know that the soup kitchen is trying to adjust to do the December 1st additions, and they are having some issues with getting some occupancy. They have 11 affordable housing units that actually are really beautiful if you haven't gotten over there, but they're set up so that you can have families, which was something we didn't have before. So you can break up the room based on that. And that'll be great, but they're already taken care of. So we can't think of the soup kitchen as the only way that's going to fix this. We built this whole new shelter, and it has all this capacity that we've already filled. So I think it is a part of the solution, but not the only part of the solution. I had a question, though, if I could. I was interested in, there was a conversation last night, and this is a piece that I'm starting to hear that I'm interested in hearing more about, is like, the shelters won't take people unless they are not on drugs and alcohol, and that becomes an issue for some of the housed populations. And then I heard a nuance that like Manchester will work with some people but we don't. Do you know what the difference is in terms of why we won't?
Director Vale.
I believe the newest community resource center that Manchester set up, they set that up as a low barrier shelter. And so what that means is that individuals, even if they are high, they can go in and they can receive shelter. Our shelters are not set up that way. And Bob can speak more to, how the mission is set up, because it doesn't take state funding. They can set their own rules. Our National Soup Kitchen and Shelter, they do test folks, and if their tests come back, showing that they have any type of substance, then they are not allowed to go into the shelter. But Bob can speak more to that.
If I may?
Of course.
Bob Mack, Welfare Officer for the City of Nashua. Yes, there's 2 shelter programs in our city proper. That's the Nashua Soup Kitchen and Shelter Program, as you know, and the Southern New Hampshire Rescue Mission, which has 2 shelter programs, one for single men, one for single women. They are a private faith-based organization. They do not allow people under the influence to go into that shelter program. As I understand it, the National Soup Kitchen and Shelter, there's some allowance there, but it is not. I guess there's been conversation at the state that all shelters that receive state funding must be low barrier, but I don't know as that's built into all those contracts yet. And I have had past conversation with Melissa Hatfield, who's in charge of the shelter contracts, that they're looking to kind of make some of those adjustments. They do promote low barrier shelter programs, and the funding through Hillsborough County that the Soup Kitchen has just applied for will target a low barrier threshold. So it will allow more people access for the winter beds. That particular grant was done in partnership. It is a county grant, so it was actually done in partnership with 1269 Cafe up in Manchester, which is not a shelter program, but a warming site, which is also a low barrier site, just to give an example of some alternative options. So it's not a sleep-in shelter, but it's an overnight warming station where people can go and get out of the elements. So, throughout all this conversation this evening, it's clear this is a very complex issue. And it's not just about money, it's not just about shelters, it's not just about housing, but it's about all of those things. And I agree, we do need to work together to address these issues. The welfare department we've been dealing with this as long as I've been welfare officer and prior to that. So it is not a new issue. We continue to assess people that apply for assistance. If we cannot get them into a shelter program, we will put them up somewhere temporarily in a motel. Unfortunately, there are some folks that that's not an option for whatever reason, and we scramble to find some other alternative. But it's not a simple issue, and it's very complicated, and we'll continue to work on it. And as has been said, there have been many, many meetings and discussions and plans that have been put on the table to try to address this very complicated issue.
Thank you for that. And I think that is a very strong point, that we have to continue to educate the public, lay people. You guys are experts on the matter and know it in and out and all the barriers that you face. Our neighbors, not so much. And they grab onto this misinformation. As you heard earlier, there was a proctologist who's running for elected office who's spreading some misinformation out there. So it's, and when someone hears a doctor say something, there's that white coat mentality, and they take it as fact. That's why having check out that committee meeting, replay it, listen to the other experts in the community here and talk about it, so they don't mislabel what's going on and what the efforts you guys are trying to do. Any issues with fire over at the encampment? I just-
Daddy was getting out of here.
So, all I can say is that we respond daily to calls involving our unhoused, and the calls really run the gamut from fires at the encampments, medical emergencies, and a common one is just somebody sleeping. Sometimes they're on a public sidewalk, sometimes they're under the canopy at St. Pat's, sometimes they're in the bushes. So sometimes there's no emergency, they're just sleeping, people don't want to get involved, they call 911. So we're involved daily. It's easy if they're out on the sidewalk, visible, but that's not always the case. We get calls to encampments, and for us, the big ticket item is to identify where the encampments are prior to going there for an emergency. So that's where we work really well with the police department, health department, solid waste. They really have a good idea where these are because they get those complaints. So the information sharing over the last year regarding this issue has been great. It's helped us because when we have to go out to these encampments, trying to locate them, especially at night, try to find the best access to them. So we try to stay ahead of that. My office goes out pretty regularly to visit encampments. We look for immediate fire, life safety hazards. You know, we look for other things like if there's needles. You know, if we go out there at night, the potential for some of our people to get stuck by needles is very real. So we try to head that stuff off, and we have some outreach agencies in the city that we work with regularly. I can call and say, hey, there's an encampment, give them the location. They'll go down and they'll take care of needle cleanup for us. So we're involved.
Great. And that's
Daily.
great, that everything you guys are doing and being proactive too, and getting out to identify before an emergency happens, so you're getting your guys in there safely as well to respond. So I think, has that run out all the questions, I hope? All right, well, thank you guys so much for joining us and humoring us with this meeting, and I'm hoping that we can continue the conversation well after December 1st, as I've spoken to other department heads that there might be other options to present back to the board, most likely just Alderman Lopez's committee, unless it involves planning or economic development, because truly I do think addressing the homeless issue does impact economic development in our city. So thanks again for coming. We appreciate it. And as a former homeless person, unhoused person, this particular matter is one of the reasons why I became a social worker. And I appreciate all the efforts that you guys are doing to help people get back on their feet. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, oh yeah, Director Hannon, you can come on up. Maybe we take a 5-minute bathroom break. We'll resume at 8:42. All right, I'm going to resume the meeting. 15 seconds. Alderman Karen needs to get out of here.
14, 13, 12, 11.
All right, we're going to be recording.
All right, everyone, I'm going to resume the meeting. We're going to have a quick presentation from Director Hannum on the Multilingual Business Accelerator Program. Director Hannum.
So, Liz Hannum, Economic Development Director. I just wanted to come give you information about a program starting next month. I've been spending a lot of time looking at the Imagine Nashua strategic plan, master plan, specifically around the economic mobility issues. And so we're working on diversifying our business ownership. And I recently got a grant to hold a business accelerator program. We hired Co-Starters, which is a company based out of Tennessee, who specifically focuses on building entrepreneurial ecosystems through this accelerator program. Through this grant, we'll have enough funding for 20 people to go through a boot camp version, which is a weekend kind of ideation. So if you have an idea and you want to figure out if it's marketable, if it pencils out, that's the program for you. And then we have enough money to do 10 people for a 10-week intensive training that takes them from a brand new business or a young business, like less than a year, all the way through the process to accelerate your progress through that, so that you can kind of grow quickly during that 10-week program. And we will be doing that in 3 different languages, which is pretty exciting. So we have locally sourced trainers, so Co-Starters will come in and train our trainers. So not only will we have these people for the boot camp and the core intensive program, but we will be able to continuously offer this program going forward because we'll have locally trained trainers. But we'll offer it in 3 different languages, and we've got quite a few people that are already interested in participating. But I'm just really excited about the potential for this program and the diversified options for kind of underemployed, multiple job owners, and people who are looking for upward mobility and diversifying business ownership. So just letting you know about that program. It'll start November 8th and 9th will be the training of trainers. And then that first week in December, we'll host that first boot camp program.
How does one qualify? Is there income requirements or anything like that?
There is not. So anyone that speaks one of the 3 languages can participate.
What are the 3 languages?
We've got Spanish, Portuguese, and English, and Brazilian Portuguese.
And how are we notifying potential applicants?
Yeah, so we have a notification that's going to go out next week that will be kind of an application process. I've got a little committee that's put together so that it's not just first come, first serve, or just people who can put an application together. So we're going to kind of go through and make sure that we're picking the best programs. And then because we have trainers locally, we'll be able to host additional programs going forward. So it will be open to people that didn't get chosen during that first round.
Have you partnered with any of the multicultural associations to get out to their?
We have not. So I've been struggling to get the notification out in multiple languages. I've been working with a lot of churches. So that's been kind of my primary notification process, just to get the word out. And we're also working with the SBA out of Portsmouth. They're actually going to come and participate in all of the boot camps and the core program, so that there's kind of building that ecosystem, so we're not just putting them through that program and then they're on their own. We've got a long-term plan for them and support systems going forward. So SCORE will also be participating, and we've got a few banks that are interested in coming to a graduation ceremony where they could potentially get funding as well. Yeah, so it's pretty exciting.
Sorry, I've asked a bunch of questions. Anyone else have any questions? Alderman Clee, then Alderman Lopez.
My question is just kind of quick. I thought I heard you say about SBA is going to be, are they part of this grant process, or are they just coming in to kind of watch, oversee, to see how the program runs, or are they taking active part in it?
They're going to take an active role in the program, so they'll be there kind of participating, working with the cohort as they go through the process and building relationships there. They were not part of the grant process. I brought them in afterwards to try to build that ecosystem around these people to build that support network.
May I follow up?
Of course, yes.
I really appreciate that, because SBA is kind of a little secret that people don't even understand in this city. For those that are trying to get loans and trying to get everything like that, the SBA is a great resource, which is why I'm so, and you mentioned SCORE and so on. So
Yeah.
I know SBA played a really big role with our small businesses during COVID and so on. That's
Yeah.
actually when I learned how much that they do. I had a constituent who called me about trying to get loan and getting started for a business that they were going to run. I went right onto the SBA website. I gave them all the resources and so on. So I think if SBA is even just in the room, it's going to help the success of these people that you're talking about. So I appreciate you bringing them in. Thank you.
Yeah.
Alderman Lopez?
So SBSA and SCORE are great partners. They both have a lot of really good relationships in the community. I was surprised you didn't mention the Cultural Connections Committee as a potential link point, or One Greater Nashua. Have you been able to contact any of them, or?
I haven't actually, so that's something that I can certainly do. I think probably the next couple of steps will be to bring in more people. One of the training of the trainers projects is to, there's like a 3-hour workshop where community partners come in with the trainers to, again, continue to build that ecosystem around entrepreneurs. So that's definitely a group that I will go to for that.
Great. Donna Marco is the chair of that, and it was originally the Mayor's Ethnic Awareness Committee, so
Okay.
it's a function of the city, and it's the mayor's appointees, so I would definitely recommend checking in with them. They're very well connected as well.
Okay, great.
Alderman Jettie?
Thank you. I'm wondering about the selection of the 3 languages. Is that just a numbers thing? I'm thinking of French, not because of they're my people, but there are a lot of Caribbean people from the Caribbean and people from Africa for whom French is a primary language.
Yeah.
Director?
For, just for volume purposes, we chose Portuguese and Spanish. But we do have the option to start adding on as we add more programs. This is going to actually be the first program that 3 languages will be spoken during the entire training. So this is kind of a pilot project for co-starters. They've done 2 languages before, but never 3. And so we're kind of trying to keep it as simple as possible while we figure out the kinks around those 3 language issues. So we've got multiple translation going on at the same time. And then we will continue to add. I think we've heard Cambodian is another big language that we would tap into eventually.
Khmer.
Khmer, yes, the Cambodian population, sorry. Khmer,
I'm from Lowell, so it's
yeah.
a large Cambodian Laos population. Get to
Yeah.
know all the intricacies of their culture.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yep.
Any other questions?
I'll be sure to add French to the list.
Thank you so much, and thank you for being so patient. With the
Yes, of
committee.
course. Thank you.
All right. Unfinished business? Oh, I'm sorry,
No.
communications.
Yeah, we have communications from Sam Durfee, Planning Manager, a referral from the Board of Aldermen on proposed ordinance O-23-059 amending the land use code notice provisions table in the Historic District Commission review procedure.
There being no objection, I'll accept the communication and place it on file. Unfinished business.
Point of order, Chairman.
Yes.
So at this point, or maybe a little bit before, we usually have public comment on here. I know we don't have anyone, but I should be on here, I would think, right?
Oh, yeah, I can address that. So,
It shouldn't?
It's at the end, it's at the end.
it's at the
But
end.
don't we have it at the beginning and the end of every meeting?
No,
So we had,
Oh, we
no
don't?
choice.
yeah, so.
Oh, okay,
For
that's
this
fine.
particular one, because we were doing the.
Public hearing?
The public hearing.
Okay.
And since we had such an important subject to discuss. And
Okay, I gotcha.
the public hearing was for what was being acted upon tonight.
Yeah.
And the other stuff wasn't being acted upon tonight.
Gotcha.
So
Just wanted to make sure.
Alderman Lopez, co-chair, and I moved it to the end.
All right, unfinished business, there is none.
New business resolutions.
There is none.
New business ordinances.
We have O-23-059, amending the land use code notice provisions table and the Historic District Commission review procedure.
Alderman Tebow?
And I'd like to make a motion to recommend final passage.
All right. Sam, would you want to come back up here? And I believe Alderman Jettie might have some questions for you, but any questions for Sam?
I'll wait my turn, but if it's my turn, yes.
Alderman Tebow?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good idea, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's a good idea for what you're doing here. I mean, the Telegraph, RIP, it's dead, it's gone. I love it, I still get it, but, you know, by the time I get it, I've already read the Union Leader and I know what's going on in the city. So, it doesn't really help me much. So, I'd like to save the money, and I wish we had a regular paper, I really do, and I wish we could put that stuff in there, but I think that time has passed. The people that say they never hear anything, well, they're not reading the paper anyway, it sounds like, so it doesn't really matter if it's in the paper or not, right? I wish there was a different way we could communicate to people, I wish there was more ways we could communicate. I have a newsletter, it goes out to 300 people every week, and I put every planning board meeting, zoning meeting, every meeting we have here, all the documents, and so does Alderman Clee. I wish I had more than 300, and I'm not sure how many she has, probably like 10,000 or something, but that's only 300 in Ward 8. So, you know, I'd like to get that information out to everybody so they have their information, they know what's going on, they know what might be coming and abutting their areas, or what's being built where and all that stuff, because I think it's important. You know, when they come up and something gets built where they're like, why is that there now? And they never heard of it, they couldn't come to a meeting to speak on it because they didn't know about it. So it's hard to get information out these days, you know, and it gets often twisted too. So you see big things when you get things like the asphalt plant, that seems to get around pretty quick. But it took a lot of people to go around to a lot of places to get people to come in for that. And even then, it was only just a full room. So, thank you.
And there is that section of the population who want to set it and forget it in regards to engagement with any government, or they want to live their lives, and if it doesn't impact them directly, they may not even notice a sign or read the newspaper, look for things until it falls in their lap. Alderman Clee?
Yeah, I have a question, but I don't want to really step on Alderman Jettie's toes, but, because I know he is going to speak about this, but may I ask the two things? One is about the signs. Personally, because we're talking about not necessarily having it in the newspapers and so on, the one thing I get calls from are people saying, I saw a sign on a property, I drove by, or I walked my dog and so on, can you tell me about it? Most of the time I go, no. And I give them the planning department's number and tell them, you know, call. They're there for you. If they don't want to call, then I will call and I will ask, and so on. So I think the signs are very important. So I'm a little confused, especially if we're not going to put it in the newspaper. I'm a little confused about that. Less than 5 is the only time you have to put signs up. And also, in addition to the signs, where does the location have to be? Because if it's on someone's window, that doesn't help. Does it have to be planted on the lawn close to where passerbyers can see it? So.
Yes, right along the frontage. You know, basically we have the signs. When we receive an application, we inform them, okay, you're gonna need to write us a check for so many abutters, and also please come in and pick up your signs when they're ready. We have to, we have these signs that all say site plan or subdivision, but then we write up basically a title for what the application is, when it's gonna be before the planning board, and we have to cut those out and paste them onto the sign so that each sign is actually specific to what is being requested. So that takes there's a little processing time. So we say, all right, we'll process these signs. So you'll note that we really want to be consistent with all of our applications and everything that's on this table as well. So signage is all going to be 5 days. So that means the sign has to be posted within 5 days of the hearing. The reason for that, it was 10 days on some of them before. The problem would be the applicant would apply, and then to make that 10 days, it would be the very next day. So one, staff would have to be very quick in their turnaround, and then the applicant would have to be available to come and pick it up, which that is not always the case. And there's been issues where they did not come and pick up their sign, they didn't post it, and now they have not complied with the noticing requirement. We have to kick them out a month. So it's a bit of a snafu. We want to be, business friendly, development friendly, while also making sure that we do notice the public. And it's a fine line to walk, but the signage really does seem to be effective, as you have indicated, having received calls. You had a question about the 5 or fewer
Right.
lots. So as I had spoken to before with Alderman Jetty's question, there's a couple of ways to look at this. So another way, I guess, and this is probably a more effective way to describe it. So say you have a large rezoning of an area. Say it's the Amherst Street corridor is getting an MU overlay. We did not sign every single parcel that would be there. That would just be, we would run out of signs. So this is also just to kind of contain and isolate, when we're looking at an area, how big and how many lots do we actually have to sign? If it's a block, that works. We can go all the way around the perimeter of the block. A lot of this was also just looking at it from a practical standpoint of what is reasonable. Because some of these things, it's applicant driven. Other times it's more city driven. We want to do a rezoning. We kind of went through some mental exercises of how we would do sorts of things, and that's how we came to that number.
Follow up?
Yeah, I'm not going to ask too many more because I really want to hear the questions from Alderman Jetty. But so just so that I understand it, what you're saying is if there's a big plot of land that will be less than 4 or 5, they only put one sign there, is what but it still has to have signage.
Mm-hmm.
And if someone is doing something to their own property, that property would have to have one sign. So I was getting confused. I thought you were saying that only if
Correct.
it was less than 4.
Right. So
they have to-
a good example would be the Mohawk Tannery redevelopment.
Okay.
There's one lot that really has the frontage, but there's multiple lots deeper into the site. So this was 4, 5, 6, maybe even 7 lots. I don't have the map in front of me, but because there was the frontage there, and because this was under this ordinance change, we would put the sign out there, and even if it was in excess of the 5 lots, because it has a single frontage, we would still err on the side of signing. We always want to do that, but if it is above and beyond and some crazy amount of signage, we would make that call and say, no, this wouldn't be appropriate. In larger rezonings, larger requests typically find their way out into the public via word of mouth, or we'll even post stuff on the Facebook page. We try and get word out there as best we can. We are constrained by staff, time, money, real world things, but we try to be as effective as possible.
Thank you. Wait, any other questions? Yes.
Alderman Karen?
Yeah. I just have, in talking about the telegraph and the cost, and I think Alderman Lopan mentioned it earlier, why not use our government channel and our community channel? Because the aldermen get a list, especially for planning and zoning, what is on there, and that's like 5 days or before your meeting. At least people would see it, and it could be the advertisement when there's nothing going on, and that wouldn't take extra staff because the person that's doing it in the first place could just get it so that it would be on the TV. And then that would save you money, because obviously you're not paying for that kind of advertisement. But I thought Alderman Lopez's suggestion was a good one. So it's something for your staff to think about.
Agreed, I think it is a great idea.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Jennings.
Thank you. So the, trying to take this in order. So regarding the, the doing away with newspaper notice, I understand your argument about, the cost and whether it's cost effective given the current situation. But, I would rather we erred in favor of giving notice to people. And there's something about a notice in a newspaper. Newspapers have always, traditionally been considered, kind of a, you hear the term newspaper of record. There's something about a newspaper that, that is, it's an official way of propounding a notice to the public. And, if we feel that the Telegraph has become ineffective, part of me says, we ought to be supporting the Telegraph, trying to help it to hang on. But if it's not, if we determine that it wasn't effective, there is the alternative of the union leader currently that is, has a lot of subscribers. And it is, considered a newspaper of record for legal notices. So I would rather we keep that. But if that fails, the other suggestions, that I've heard are good ones. I know that, I see the notices that Alderman Tebow and Alderman Klee put in their weekly newsletter, of what's coming up in the before the zoning board and the planning board, and those are good. I've been talking about trying. I think what they're doing is great. I'm thinking of trying to imitate them and do the same thing. But they're the numbers that they talk about, it's really a small number of people who are getting that. But it is a way of, would there be a way that I get a notice from, is it Kate Poirier? Is that her name?
Yeah. Yes.
I'm sure other, the other, maybe she sends it to all the aldermen, but is there a way for people to sign up with her and that they would get this by email? That's another way of.
Yes, there is.
Of getting the word out. But I'm against doing away with, the newspaper altogether. The other thing is with that has been brought out, and, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for you and Director Sullivan and everybody that works in your department. But I'm fond of saying that hopefully you'll be here forever, but maybe not. And the next person who occupies your position, may not be as may not have the same attitude. They may think, what's the minimum I have to do? And I look at the ordinance, and this is what the ordinance requires, and that's all that I'm going to do. That's all I have to do. And the way you've written it is that signage shall only be required for a rezoning if the proposed rezoning would affect 5 or fewer lots or require posting along 4 or fewer frontages. So, and you said that almost never happens. that the zoning is always usually bigger than that. So basically, what I hear you saying is that if this passes, you won't be posting any signs, because it's not you personally, but it's not required. So you wouldn't have to post any signs to alert the public about a proposed zoning change. So, when you take away the newspaper ad saying that the signs are more effective, but then you're taking away the signs, what is left? So,
Mr. Durfee, can you answer that?
Certainly. So, I've only been here about a year now. We haven't had too many rezonings in my time. So I'm going to keep referring to the MU overlay up on Amherst Street. So this would not fall under that. It's more than 5 lots. It's more than 4 frontages. You have Amherst and then all of the side streets that come off of that. Without this language, right now, we wouldn't be signing anyways, and even with this, we wouldn't either. Basically what I'm saying is that current practice for these large rezonings have not been signed. With this, it is enshrining that for smaller ones, we make sure that they are signed. Now, Mohawk is a good example because it's only 1 frontage, even if it is more than 5 lots, that would be signed. This is really looking at those kind of block rezonings where you do have 4 frontages, even if you are over 5 lots. So I'm not saying that it wouldn't happen, and it is more geared towards, we want to make sure that we are signing the potentially smaller rezoning efforts, the more neighborhood ones. But you are correct in observing that this is a change. It is, I wouldn't say a gross deviation from current practice, but it is more, I would look at it more as a way that we make sure that we are signing for these smaller, arguably more impactful neighborhood rezonings if and when they do occur. But traditionally, they're far and few between.
Alderman Jettie?
Please, thank you. So when you say that that currently rezoning doesn't require any signage, I'm looking at table 126-1 of the existing ordinance, and it says rezoning, signage 10 days.
Mm-hmm.
So
it may, I mean, more be speaking to what I've seen as past practice. I haven't seen large amounts of rezoning signs go out for very large rezonings. Now, that would arguably be in conflict with what our ordinance requires, and I do recognize that. And that would be a misstep on our part. Again, the MU overlay on Amherst Street was so large, signing that would be impractical, and it received a lot of attention. It was well publicized. I think word of mouth travels a lot as well. And it's certainly supported at the aldermanic level. So there had been conversation about it in other realms around this horseshoe. So it is more of it's hard to say that it's a case-by-case basis, because that's not how we want to approach this. We want to have standardized practice. But from what I had observed in past practice, we needed something a bit more concrete, and recognizing that large rezonings, signing for those was really just impractical.
okay, so I can't imagine that you generally, your department, with the aid of the municipal association, other jurisdictions must deal with this problem. That when you have a large zoning area, I can understand you wouldn't want to have to put a sign up on every lot that's affected. But, maybe, like the Amherst Street thing, maybe a sign that on Amherst Street as you enter that area that's proposed to be affected, so that, maybe there's a way of constructing language that would, take care of the problem that you see with the individual signs, but, also provide notice to people, so that we don't, end up, rezoning part of the city and, without everybody knowing about it. And I have one last thing, if I could, Mr. Chairman.
Of course, yes.
And then, reducing the 10 days to 5 days. I heard your answer to the question about the reason, but, couldn't that be taken care of by changing the schedule? If somebody applies for something and the 5 days is, the 10 days is just there's just not enough room, couldn't you schedule it out so that there'd be room for the 10 days? Because 5 days is really a short period of time. And if you're shifting the notice to signs as opposed to newspaper, I would think we would want to give people more of a chance to know about what's happening, so that they can learn about it. If you're depending on people driving by and seeing the sign, and the signs are, the sign alerts you that something's going on, but without getting out of your car and walking up to the sign, you really can't see what's going on. You have to read it. You have to get out, go look at it, or call you, and so giving people time to do all of that, 5 days just seems tight.
Mr. Durfee?
Sure. So yes, 5 days is the minimum. 5 days had been in this table for a number of these noticing scenarios. So we were just trying to be consistent. 5 days is the minimum. We typically have these signs prepared 2 weeks out from the public hearing. Again, it's incumbent on the applicants to come and pick them up and post them. And if they aren't out within 10 days before the meeting, they're in violation of the requirements of the ordinance. Granted, that would require us catching that, which I'll admit we don't go out and inspect every posting for everything that's on each of our agendas. It's just a very time-consuming thing to do. So while theoretically a sign could be out 5 days before the meeting, I think in reality it would be much closer to that 10 days, simply because we don't drag our feet in preparing the signs. We want to get them out as quickly as possible. So then the applicant has the opportunity to bring them and post them out on the frontage. You had another comment relative. I'm trying to remember what it was. I had a good answer for you though.
Well, while you're trying to think of it, when you say you're trying to make it more consistent, under the current table, I count 5 situations where 10 days is required and only 2 where 5 days is required. And you're changing it so everything's going to be 5 days, so you're instead of going what the majority provides for now, you're going with what the minority provides for. You're reducing the amount of time that people will be able to.
Yes. And I am remiss because I do not have my marked up version. I'm looking at what is proposed. And with that note, I now remember that we are actually adding signage requirements for things that didn't have them previously. Things that could actually be signed. Something like a communication tower, that's probably not going to be applicable for signage because the radius is massive. But we did go through this, and we also looked for opportunities where we can provide notice that would be appropriate for a certain type of application, even if there isn't already a notice provision in the table. And we also did add other actions in that A column that we have applications for, but they weren't on the notice table. So this is more of a comprehensive effort to not only streamline things, make some consistencies, rectify some misquoted statutes, but also bring in and make sure that all of our applications are incorporated into this table.
Alderman Tebow?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm going to support this for now, but I will say that Alderman Jettie, as always, brings up enough points to make me start thinking about things. And I would definitely support you if in your vast wealth you bought the Telegraph and started to put it out every day. I'd even write a column for you, a weekly one, because I would love to have the Telegraph back, and then I'd be supporting Alderman Jettie 100%. But I think, the 5 days, 10 days, I mean, I would like them to be up longer too, to a certain extent. And I know you said that they're available to put up longer.
Mm-hmm.
It's up to the person to come and get them and put them out. And I mean, I don't know how you get them how to force them to come out. I guess you're just kind of making this easier for them to be able to put them out and have less time to have them out, I guess. I mean, are we kind of taking the bad behavior of the person that's putting out the sign and kind of amending this so that it's easier for them, or?
I wouldn't say that. It's
Okay.
more, like I said, where the turnaround is almost immediate, where applicants, they get notified, hey, your sign is ready. You have to come in the next day and post it. People go on vacation. These design professionals are working in other towns. Sometimes that's just not feasible, and then they are out of compliance with the notification and we have to bump them a month. There's a lot of frustration that goes into that. And as Alderman Tebow, as you know, you get on a spring planning board agenda, everything's ramping up for construction season, and we start shifting big projects around, that really can throw off our agenda. When we had, nice 3-hour meetings lined up, and now because someone missed their notification deadline, we have a 1 hour and a 5-hour meeting. And it really, this actually gets to the point that I recall and I wanted to bring up. Expanding the time for signage, we run into a cycle issue where applicants come in, we process their application, we generate their signage, it gets posted, the meeting occurs. If we start stretching out the application period, right now you basically have to apply a month and a half in advance of the meeting. We would be asking them, okay, well now you have to apply 2 months in advance of the meeting or more to be able to get those signs out for a longer period of time. When you have applications, and we're running 2 meetings a month per board, this becomes a lot to juggle, especially peak season. And the only other thing I do want to say about the newspaper, it's only the planning board and the historic district commission that we're attempting to no longer be required to notice. The zoning board, the state statute hasn't been amended to allow zoning board applications to not be included on local newspapers. So the zoning board agenda will still go out to the Telegraph.
Alderman Clee, and then hopefully we can.
Thank you. I don't get to vote on this. And I hear, being on the planning board, I understand and I hear what you're saying about having to maintain that cycle and everything, so I'm not disagreeing with anything. But my concern would be that if we only do 5 days, which, again, I don't get to vote on, you put the sign up and you've got 5 days. Depending upon the weather, especially when you're talking about the spring and so on, they have to put it 5 days before the meeting begins. But then we also have all of those deadlines, even for the public, as to when they can write in public comment. They can come to the meeting and they can speak to it and so on. And having been on that board, one thing that I do know is that it's not always the abutters that come and want to talk. It could be somebody, and especially the historic district is in my ward. So I go to the HDC meetings, and one of the things that we hear about is, their roof is gonna be too high, or they're going to change the line of that roof and so on. So if there's only 5 days, those that live maybe not physically touching, and I know an abutment is also across the street. So I do understand it's not just the physical touching, but it could be somebody within the neighborhood who's also part of the historic district. They take it very seriously. They're very, I don't want to say they covet it, but, you know, they look at it as we're trying to keep this and trying to maintain this. And I know that we had one issue a couple of years ago where we had to do a cease and desist because they decided to change out their windows and so on. That was a person who wasn't going to, they were going to try to get out of being compliant. If someone hadn't walked by and saw that they were doing something different, it was someone from the city that actually had seen that. This is a person who's only going to put it out for 5 days because they don't want to give the neighbors any warning. They don't want to do this. So those that are good might get it out for 10 days if you get it done. But I'm telling you that those that can push the envelope may not even put that sign out. And now that we've just announced that you don't go out and look at them, people are going to take that to heart. But, I mean, that's my concern. I wish we could do a 7-day versus a 5-day, but I don't vote on this. I'm just, it is my concern that it's not going to give people, we have foul weather, we have this, we have snow, they put it there, snow comes on it. It's there for 5 days, but no one can see it. So I'd like to know what is that. And spring leads up to all those weather issues, so. And that's a big one, but I do understand and respect the schedule issues.
And one thing too, if we did make changes here, we'd have to go back, have another public hearing. So my suggestion is that we vote on it. If any member wants to make a change at the full board, and that receives a majority of the vote, then it can come back with a public hearing, and then we do it all over again.
Wouldn't you want to do that public hearing sooner than later? Just saying.
Well, also, if I'm hearing that if anyone wants to make a change, they might not be a member of this committee.
Yeah,
So they may have to make it at the full board versus here. So with that, I'm going to call for the vote. The motion is for final passage. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? And the ayes have it.
Is that 4 votes? 4 votes, right?
Yeah, 4, Tom did it.
4.
Yeah. Right, tabled in committee.
There's nothing?
General discussion. Public comment. Anyone from the public willing to comment? Seeing none. Remarks by Alderman. Alderman Jettie? Sorry. Alderman Tebow.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So I just wanted to comment on the conversation we had earlier about the unsheltered and the homeless situation. You know, I don't know, I guess I was a little disturbed by the conversation. More so because you know, it's a tough problem to solve. It's national. It's probably international, right? And if someone had the quick trick to make sure people got what they need, there would be no homelessness in this country. And so we need to keep the discussions humane and compassionate and empathetic. But at the same time, we need to make sure that the city is doing what they can. And I trust our public health officials. I think they do a marvelous job. And so I don't think anybody here was trying to criticize or go after them as much as we just wanted to know what we could do to help and what's going on. Some of us here have wards where it's more prevalent than others, and they're involved a lot with the situation. Others, like myself, are on the outskirts of it, but still, you know, try to get involved whenever I can and try to certainly voice my opinion, because I think it's an important issue. We need people to be safe. We need people to be able to find places where they can eat and be sheltered and get the services they need, whether it's mental health. You know, in the recent forums that we had last week, I literally heard a candidate call these people crackheads, which disturbed me to the core. That's not what they are. And you can't put them all in the same group. The only group they're in is they don't have a place to stay, but they're all different. They all have different issues that they need solved. And, you know, I wish we could solve them all like that, and we can't, but we try. And we have many, many people on this board that care, and some of them work in the field of mental health. that certainly deal with it a lot more than some of the rest of us. So, you know, I think it definitely I think Alderman Lopez does a great job with his Human Affairs Committee to constantly bring up the ways that we can help people, and not just the homeless, but help people in general, whether it's mental health or, you know, getting the services they may need even though they're housed. And I think, you know, I think the rest of us need to continue to pay attention to that stuff and continue to try to find ways that we can help people. That's what we should do. Like I said earlier, we serve people. That's our position here. We don't serve ourselves. We're here to serve other people. So I don't know what that discussion was supposed to be about. I thought it was just, somebody said earlier, just an update on what was going on, and I'm to blame too. It kind of derailed a little bit. But I guess it's just a rant. But I just wanted to bring that up, and I think we're all committed to continue to do what we need to do to try to help our city and help the people in it. So thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Cleve?
Thank you. Sorry. Did you want to speak first?
No, she go first. I just realized I missed my shot.
I want to, I don't usually share conversations I have with people afterwards, but after that meeting, I had a little bit of a conversation with Director Bagley, and she was not just speaking of that one population within Crown Hill. She was talking about the homeless population in general, and what happens is, and I'm going to use my own words and not hers, population, du jour, of the day kind of thing. We've seen the public do this to those who had HIV. We've seen the public do this to minorities, where we want to villainize and we want to make them something that they're not. They're human beings like all of us. And that was, I think, the point that she was trying to make, and wanted to assure that we don't single out any one population. Because what we will do is exactly what has been happening here. Dehumanize, villainize them, and we make them less than human beings. And as a society and as a community, we can't do that. So I applaud her for her comments. It brought things right back to perspective, and I think she was probably overwhelmed with some of the comments that were coming at, and this has been a very long and hard work that they've all done. So I just want the public to know we cannot single out, and I'm not just talking about that particular group, we can't even just single out the unhoused and call them crackheads or call them drug users or say that they all have mental health issues. And Alderman Moran, you shared that at one point you were homeless. For the grace of God, I wasn't. And I shared with Director Bagley that I had lived in Ogden, Utah, and came home on vacation. Christmas Eve, got a phone call, my apartment burned down. I lost everything. The only thing I had was my car that a friend of mine had taken me to the airport. And I remember turning to my mother. I was 19 years old, and I turned to my mother and said, I got to go back there because I have a job. That was my job. I had to go back there, but what do I go back to? I didn't have an apartment. I didn't have any clothes other than what I had taken with me, and I had my car. Back then, in 1980, I think it was, I pictured myself sleeping in my car until I could get those first couple paychecks so that I could get an apartment and so on, because I was living hand to mouth. I did not have a savings. I did not have any of that thing. I say but for the grace of God, because I had the most amazing people. It was Christmas, so family bought me clothes. Friends that I had there found an apartment for me. Red Cross gave me $150 for that. I had such a support system, and these people don't. But for the grace of God. And I truly mean that. I could have been one of those people. You were. And so to turn around and to classify these people as crackheads or people who don't want to work or lazy. We have veterans there. I was looking at the population when we had that meeting yesterday as to what is being served. They don't all have mental health issues. They don't all have drug issues. We see mothers who from domestic violence who are hiding and have children, with them. So I think we need some more compassion. And if information gets out before we know about it, It's going to be frustrating, but we will go with the flow and we will support and do everything that we possibly can. And I want the public to hear this. They have a roof over their heads, and there are some people that have roof over their heads, but they're sleeping on someone's couch because they have no other place to go. So I just like us all to lead with compassion, and I'm grateful for somebody like Director Bagley, who took the time to explain exactly what it meant. She was frustrated there, but she did a phenomenal job and has worked very hard, so thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Lopez?
I think it's worth pointing out that if our very, very well-educated, compassionate, and hardworking director could be overwhelmed in a conversation about homelessness, I'm trying to imagine what the people who are stuck in that situation are feeling right now. You're not seeing them at their best. And I think it's important for us as a city to remember that even people who are struggling can bring a tremendous amount back to our city. Having worked with the homeless for 20 years, I've seen a lot of them regain their housing, regain their jobs, build families, and you'd be surprised. I mean, I guess Alderman Moran, someone as accomplished as you, wouldn't be surprised because you know what it takes to build up from the beginning, from the bottom. So I think we need to remember that these struggles are also opportunities to help people out of the darkness that they're in and back into our community. And it's not going to start by slashing tents or pushing them out or any of that kind of stuff, but I don't think that reflects that neighborhood either. I think they were dealing with a situation they couldn't anticipate. And as long as we all remember that we don't always show our best face in the middle of a crisis, then we can move on and not continue to treat every moment as though it is an ongoing crisis. So I want to thank everybody who came, particularly because with Alderman Moran, I thought it was important that we have a city alderman level meeting. And I didn't want to encroach on Alderman Karen's neighborhood meeting because I think that was where the neighbors needed to be heard and it had to be their voices, their concerns, and their priorities. But as aldermen, we have bigger priorities and we need to make sure that we're funding the programs that need funding, we're bringing resources back to the departments that need them, and we're maintaining those relationships with people. So I appreciate everybody who showed up tonight as an alderman and as a leader to find out what was going on and to offer your support for this ongoing issue and the many issues that are attached with it. I think Nashua has a very good heritage of nonprofit organizations coming together and dealing with crises and overcoming adversity and helping people and keeping the focus on the people that are struggling the most. And I think we'll navigate through this as well, and we'll come up with new, innovative ways that we can be proud of to say this is how we tackle this as a community, and this is what we're about as a community. So thank you, everyone. A quick announcement as well. I'm doing a Main Street Community Watch meeting tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. over at Caribbean Breeze. It's mostly meant for residents and businesses on Main Street, but if anybody's interested in finding out what's going on, Nashua Police is always very supportive. The Public Health Department is also helpful, and we typically have nonprofit organizations that are there to tell us what they're up to and what kind of resources are available.
Great. They have an excellent breakfast there as well. Yeah, I too would like to thank everyone who came out from the city to discuss the unhoused residents. I won't go further into my personal life, but it's, well, Tom will know this because he's also a mental health clinician. You kind of avoid things that you find to be traumatic. And when I was at that public meeting last week, I recalled many things from my past that was resurgent in my brain. And I think the way in which these people were vilified and struck a chord with me to talk to Alderman Lopez about having this meeting. One, I think Alderman Wilshire put it perfectly. We need to ramp up services, and we can't have meetings without it being a public meeting. We can't talk about how we can introduce legislation, create legislation, or have larger conversations without violating public meeting laws. And I think it's a good thing that we had the meeting. I don't think wanting information and sharing it with our constituents is a bad thing overall. I can see how it can get frustrating being a subject matter expert and that be your professional life, and then trying to explain it to others that don't understand. I definitely get that. And it's not meant to attack or criticize in any means, but we're just asking to be partners, because these are the folks that elect us to represent them, whether they're housed or unhoused. And we have a duty to educate all of our constituents, and we have a duty, I believe, to engage with the city administration on what they're doing to support our constituents. And I think that's what we did here tonight. And, you know, I've been a director, I've been a chief clinical officer, I'm an owner or whatnot. Yet you have to be prepared to have critical questions asked of you, no matter what you run. And we are a very supportive board for our city departments. Sometimes it's part of the job to be criticized. I don't know what else to say. That's just the way life works. Public, private, that's just the way life works. All right, do I have a motion? Alderman Tebow.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
That motion is in order. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
And we are adjourned at 9:40.
You don't count.
You don't-
It's a